Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder what it takes for an animal like a little ant or a clever octopus to navigate its world, find food, or avoid danger? Today we're diving deep into a fascinating question. What does it even mean to be aware? This paper asks a really fundamental question that has gotten tangled up with bigger ideas like consciousness and intelligence. Think about a bird dodging wind, an octopus squeezing through a tight spot, or a dog chasing a mail carrier. We intuitively say these animals are aware of what is going on around them. But the researchers here are trying to pin down what that awareness really is, separate from whether the animal is thinking or feeling. In the same way we do, they propose that awareness is all about an organism's ability to selectively process, store, and use information to get things done to achieve its goals. The challenge is that scientists are now studying awareness not just in animals, but in all sorts of things from plants to AI. This makes comparing them super tricky. Words like consciousness, cognition, agency, attention, and intelligence all overlap, but have different meanings. The authors point out that we often lump awareness into these discussions instead of looking at it on its own. They want to define awareness as a basic responsiveness to information that helps guide an organism towards its goals. So why bother comparing minds across species at all? Well, it helps us understand how minds evolved. It also helps us think about whether things like consciousness emerged gradually or all at once. And importantly, it has ethical implications. If certain abilities ground our moral duties to animals, we need to be able to assess them. Plus, studying different species helps us refine our own concepts. It is like a stress test for our ideas. One big hurdle is what they call epistemic access. That is a fancy way of saying, how do we actually know what is going on in another creature's mind? With humans, we can ask them. But with animals, we have to rely on behavior and physical evidence. The problem is these methods are often theory-laden. What we see and how we interpret it depends on what we already believe. When we try to apply findings from humans to other animals, we have to make a lot of assumptions. They suggest it's often better to start by looking at what an animal can do behaviorally before worrying too much about the underlying mechanisms or what it might feel like for them. They're giving priority to what they call behavioral functional evidence. Another challenge is conceptual framing. The words we use like cognition and consciousness are messy. They mean different things to different people and in different contexts. The authors explain that concepts can change and evolve. This is good, but it can lead to misunderstandings, especially when we're trying to compare across species. Consciousness, for example, is a super broad concept. Thinking about it can lead to binary answers like conscious or unconscious, which might obscure more nuanced realities. Similarly, cognition has been shaped by the computer metaphor and can be hard to define clearly. They argue that we need a concept that is easier to measure using behavioral and functional evidence, remains neutral about big theoretical debates, and can be applied across many different kinds of life. They think awareness might be that concept. All these issues together create a compounding problem. We have limited access to animal minds and our concepts are often ambiguous. This makes it hard to avoid underdetermination. That means that often multiple explanations can equally fit the same behavioral data. It is like having a puzzle where several different pictures could be on the box. We need a concept that helps us structure our thinking and design experiments that can actually tell the difference between these explanations. The paper really emphasizes disentangling awareness from consciousness. Right now, these terms are often used interchangeably or one is seen as a part of the other. This creates confusion. For example, when people say conscious awareness, it kind of implies that awareness can also be unconscious, which suggests they aren't the same thing. The authors point to existing distinctions, where awareness is seen as something more basic than full-blown consciousness. Think about the difference between being awake and knowing what is happening around you. You can be awake without necessarily being fully aware of every single detail. So how do we define this more basic awareness? The paper suggests it has adaptive value. Organisms that can better process information about their environment can survive and reproduce more effectively. They propose that awareness isn't a simple yes or no thing, but more like a gradient. Behaviors can be more or less aware depending on how coordinated, controlled, and flexible they are. Imagine a simple reflex versus a learned behavior that adapts to new situations. The core idea is that awareness helps organisms deal with complex and uncertain environments. It's part of their toolkit for survival. They're not claiming this is the only way to think about evolution, but that the idea of awareness helps us understand a set of abilities that allow organisms to find opportunities and respond to them in a way that makes sense for their situation. The paper suggests that awareness isn't just automatic reactions. Aware beings are those whose behavior is flexibly organized around goals. Instead of a strict automatic versus controlled divide, they propose a gradual feature-based approach. This means we can be more or less aware. They also clarify that intentionality here means goal. Directedness not necessarily having complex beliefs or desires. So even simple behaviors aimed at an outcome can reflect a basic level of goal-directedness. They highlight coordinated, controlled, and flexible responses as key indicators. Coordinated responses involve putting different actions together for a goal. Controlled responses imply some level of regulation and resolving conflicts between different options. Flexible responses mean adapting behavior to new situations. They're proposing awareness as a technical term for science. This means taking the everyday idea of being aware of something and making it precise. The goal is to be able to compare different organisms in a systematic way. This technical notion involves context-sensitive information processing, the abilities an animal has to select and use information to guide goal-directed action. It's about how an animal registers and responds to its environment itself and other creatures. They view this as a dispositional profile where an animal has a certain set of abilities. This profile helps us map an animal's position in a multidimensional space of action perception abilities. This leads to a pragmatic approach. Instead of asking if an animal is aware, they're asking how aware it is. This is done by looking at its position in that multidimensional ability space. Placement is inferred from how it performs on tasks and how well it interacts with its environment and others. This isn't about a single score, but a profile of abilities. The paper emphasizes that abilities are about stable, repeatable capacities, not just a single successful performance. Abilities are like dispositions. A fragile glass is disposed to break when dropped, not because it has a hidden property, but because that is how it behaves under certain conditions. Similarly, an ability is about how an organism tends to behave across a range of situations. They favor a success-based approach for this. What counts as success is measured by things like accuracy and efficiency. This means looking at patterns of performance across multiple trials and conditions. The paper also talks about action perception abilities. As creatures evolved, the ability to move and act, their sensing abilities had to become more sophisticated to guide those actions. They are seen as interdependent. Behavior is just a coordinated response, but action goes beyond that, often involving intentionality. Agency is also seen as a gradient from simple feedback control to complex human-like agency. Perception is more than just sensation, it involves interpreting the causes of sensations. Together, action perception abilities span from basic sensitivity to flexible engagement with the environment. To make this concrete, they give an example of spatial awareness in desert ants. These ants are amazing navigators using path integration, which is like keeping track of their path from start to finish, but they also use visual cues and landmarks. The interesting part is that what looks like landmark cues might actually be scene recognition because their vision isn't great. This highlights a key point. First, task design needs to be specific to the organism. What works for one animal might not work for another. Second, just because two things look similar behaviorally doesn't mean they are the same. Landmark navigation and scene recognition might result in similar paths, but they are different underlying abilities. Third, abilities within a dimension can be distinct. Spatial awareness isn't one thing, it is a profile of different spatial abilities. This ant example shows how a structured graded assessment can reveal more nuanced findings than a simple yes or no question. Now, for some anticipated objections. The authors agree it doesn't magically solve the problem of inferring minds from behavior, but they argue awareness helps reframe the problem. Instead of being stuck with ambiguous terms like consciousness and cognition, they offer awareness as a structuring heuristic. It helps organize abilities into comparable profiles and points us toward experiments that can actually differentiate between hypotheses. It makes the problem more systematically addressable. They counter that because terms like cognition and attention are themselves, so ill-defined any strict separation is difficult. Instead, they distinguish concepts by their epistemic aim. Attention, for example, focuses on the mechanisms for efficient information use. Awareness is more about mapping the abilities themselves without committing to specific mechanisms. Cognition can involve complex reasoning or representations, while awareness aims to map the ability space more neutrally. They clarify that emphasizing observable behavior is a methodological choice for cross-species. Comparison, not a claim about the ultimate nature of awareness. The dispositional profile is the evidence. Even on a constitutive reading where awareness is the set of abilities, those abilities can still be informative and meaningful. They see awareness as a working construct whose value comes from guiding research and organizing data. Overlap is expected given how many theories of consciousness there are, but they argue awareness is in a sense prior. It focuses on the action-perception abilities that allow organisms to navigate their world. Whether they are conscious of doing these things is left open. This makes awareness a complementary concept, not a competing one. So to wrap up, this paper makes a strong case for treating awareness as a distinct concept from consciousness. They offer a functional understanding of awareness focused on an organism's abilities to select, process, store, and use information for goal-directed action. This is a theoretically modest concept that can be applied across many species. By understanding awareness as a position within a multidimensional space of abilities, we can create a systematic way to map patterns of adaptive performance across different contexts and species. It's a way to make progress in understanding the minds of other creatures without getting bogged down in the complex debates about consciousness. This research is really exciting because it offers a more accessible way to study these complex abilities in animals. By focusing on what animals can do and how they respond to their environment, we can build a clearer picture of their capabilities. It's not about saying animals think like us, but about understanding their unique ways of engaging with the world. And that opens up so many possibilities for future research, both in understanding the evolution of minds and in our ethical considerations for other species. I really appreciate how they're trying to build a bridge between abstract ideas and concrete, observable behaviors. What do you all think about this definition of awareness? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science breakdowns. See you next time!